Hmm. Hello, 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 hello. Bitch. That's right. How we doing? I'm back for another video, and it is a video this time, and not stream. I don't know. There's something about the streaming mechanism when it publishes the stream. It like cuts things off and kind of fucks up, and it's kind of annoying to be honest with you. So back to uploading videos instead, or at least for a little while. I might try the streaming thing again, just because it is kind of cool. Like if people are online if they could chat with me while I'm streaming. Um, but for now, I'll just do a few videos in the meantime because I just feel like the streaming thing is a bit all over the place. But anyway, I don't want to keep rambling at the beginning. There is just a couple of things I want to say before I get into the topic of the video. But I've got a couple of videos in the works that are going to be quite different to what I normally do. Most of my videos are just rant videos to the camera because I'm not really an editor. I'm not a documentary filmmaker or anything like that. I'm just a talking head. I'm just a pundit, I suppose. I do my research. I don't just try. I try my best not to speak from ignorance. I don't always supply my evidence, obviously, because I'm kind of just going off the cuff. But I try to have as much of an informed perspective as I can do. Although I'm very open to the fact that I could be wrong or have maybe just not have the full picture of things, which is fair enough. And anybody in the comments that wants to point that out to me, they can do. And if they want to point out where I'm wrong and what they think I'm wrong about, then I'm happy to supply any evidence that I have. Because I have had a couple of comments which YouTube actually censors, by the way. Like, I get comments sometimes that I can see that I've had a comment, but when I click it, it won't actually take me to the comment. It's like it doesn't exist, even though I can see I've had a notification for it. And so I can't actually interact with it. And I've had a couple of people try to point out something where I've gone wrong, but I can't see it because it cuts off. Like, the notification thing only shows you so much of the message. And so, yeah, I'm kind of a bit stuck with that. Like, I don't know what to do about that. It seems like YouTube just doesn't want me to see certain comments for some reason. But if you do happen to comment, like I say, point out where I'm going wrong, where you think I'm going wrong. And yeah, like I say, I'll provide any evidence to back up any of my arguments. And if I can't find any evidence, maybe I've just kind of said it for some weird reason, then I'll submit that I was wrong. I'm not like so rigid like that. But I will fight my corner if I have to. But anyway, like I say, there's two videos that I've got coming up. They are probably going to take a little while because I'm not an editor. I'm not like a professional video maker or anything like that. So I'm kind of learning on the fly. But I want them to be very well researched. That's the one thing that I know I can do is research well. And I want them to be well researched, and I want them to be very comprehensive, and I want them to have like a really good point. So the first one is going to be about the riots and just a comprehensive look at the riots that have gone on during the lockdown. I think that'll probably be the first one that I do, just because the other one requires a lot more research and historical research, which is more difficult to do and just more lengthy. So it's the second one being a kind of a deep dive into the gangs of New York in the 1800s. And if you are unaware of the gangs of New York in the 1800s, I really implore you to watch the film with Leonardo DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis. And it was directed by Martin Scorsese, I believe. That whole thing it's very eye-opening. It's very, very eye-opening, and I want to draw a lot of parallels between then and today. And I think it'll be really interesting. It'll be a really interesting expose into the life and times of New York in early 1800s through to the late 1800s, and to just kind of chronicle that and see if there's any interesting little tidbits we can take away from it, and see if we can apply it to anything that's going on today. But like I say, go back and watch the film. if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it but it was a long time ago and you can't really remember, because that film is actually a historical. It's. I was going to say it's historically correct. It's not historically correct in the sense that everything happened as it did. It's more like a time capsule of a film. So it comprises about 3-4 decades of history, historical goings on in New York into one film, into one time and place. So it's a little bit misleading in that situation. Like, just for example, the one of the main villains in the film, Daniel Day-Lewis, he is playing Bill Cutting, who is a reenactment of Bill the Butcher, who is a real guy, William Poole. And this guy, in the film, at the end of the film, they fight. They have a fight during there's like a riot. There was this riot during the Civil War and stuff like that, or something like that, and they had to bring troops in to sort it out. I think it was the Dead Rabbit riots or something like that, and that was in like the 1860 something. But William Poole actually died in like 1855. So these, and the way that he died was not like it is in the film. Stuff like that, like. There's these little inconsistencies in terms, because they've obviously had to script a film around these things. However, the character of Bill Poole and the way that he interacts in the film with the world of the film is fairly accurate. Like the way that the gangs interact with politics and the whole situation, the police, everything. That's quite accurate. Like, there's all these things like Tammany Hall and stuff. If you don't know anything about Tammany Hall, please look into Tammany Hall. Very interesting. But yeah. Anyway, I already said I wasn't going to ramble on and just get into the into the video, but here I am rambling as per usual. So I'll cut it off there. But those are the two videos that you've got to look forward to, and hopefully they should be coming out in the next. Well, the first one should be within the next month, I would like to say, but I don't want to put a full time limit on it because I honestly just don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know how frustrated I'm going to get with editing and how easy that's going to be. I honestly don't know. So, yeah. But anyway, so today's topic, you probably read in the title, is what wrestling taught me about politics. And you're probably going to think, what the fuck, average centrist? What? Where are you coming from with this? Wrestling has nothing to do with politics. It's a fixed sport. It's entertainment. It's got nothing to do with politics. Politics is a world removed. And I would say, no, actually, there's a lot of similarities with wrestling and politics that you'd probably be quite surprised. Like, there's a lot you can learn about the smoke and mirrors of politics via a lens of wrestling. And obviously we're veering into something of conspiracy theory elements here, but just bear with me and just see what you think, because there is a lot of mainstream thought in politics that there are people behind the scenes pulling the strings, like maybe bankers or wealthy elites or vested interests, military types, you name it. There are different factions and forces in the background kind of orchestrating the things that you see, the media headlines that you read, and the things that you hear on the radio, and the things that you consume on a daily basis. And I don't think that's beyond the pale, really. I think that's very I think it's just standard practice. I think it has been standard practice for a long time, and I think it always will be. I mean, if you've ever read The Prince by Machiavelli, you will know that, like, he says, there is a version of events that you tell the people, and then there's a version of the events that you know to be the truth. That's a paraphrase. I'm not saying that's not a literal quote from the book, but there are things that allude to that kind of idea in that book, and that's kind of where wrestling comes in. Now let's outline what wrestling is. Wrestling is a fixed sport for entertainment, so none of the outcomes of wrestling are naturally, naturally conduced. They are predetermined backstage. They have bosses and managers and script writers and narrative writers who they concoct these stories for the entertainment of the people. Now, sometimes the conflicts in the ring may actually be real. Backstage, these two actors or wrestlers, if that's what whichever way you want to call them, these two people may actually have real grievances behind closed doors that are spilling out into the ring, and they may even actually strike each other for real and really try to hurt each other, even though they know one's going to win and one's going to lose, and they're going to do that to keep their job. But fundamentally, they're going to do things on purpose to actually hurt each other. So these things can exist, but also they can just be friends, and this whole thing is just a ruse. The whole, oh, I hate you, I'm going to beat you down at WrestleMania, and all that stuff. Like, they say all that to each other, and then they go backstage and are having coffees and beers and talking about all the girls that they've banged or something. I don't know, but like this is where this comes in, because when we look at the state of the world that we're in today, I do believe sometimes that some of the similar circumstances are going on. Now, I'm not saying it's literally exactly the same as wrestling. That'd be foolish. There is no Vince McMahon of the Illuminati that has curated everything that you see. However, I do think there is some level of complicitness between the left and right wing sides of the political spectrum and the media. And I do think there is some level of collusion between countries to maybe appear to be either in conflict or in disagreement, maybe, when realistically they're not really. I think Britain and Saudi Arabia's relationship could be considered something akin to that. So why am I saying this? Why am I making this video, and why do I think this is important? Well, my last video about the state of the world and what China has been doing with buying up all the old trade routes of the British Empire, their military exercises with Russia, and their power grabs by taking over Hong Kong and all the rest, and also the virus. I think the virus, I more and more I think the virus was a form of an attack. Now, where does the wrestling side of it come into it? Well, it's very easy for China to then pretend, because the virus affected them first, although they did try and cover it up, but because the virus affected them first, they can say, well, it affected us, so we didn't mean for it to happen like it did. When in reality, the smoke and mirror is that, yeah, they really did actually mean for it to happen like they did. In fact, this was all orchestrated to happen as it did. And that is to me similar to a wrestling storyline. It's a narrative. It's a narrative that they've weaved to manipulate people and to, I guess you could say, entertain the masses, keep people placid, keep them under your control. Because if you have control of how people think and the narratives of what they're thinking and saying and doing, then you you just have you can become the Vince McMahon of that situation. You can be reaping all the benefits of it. And China have done that, and I think other people have become complicit in it as well, because they know they can't speak plainly. Like, a politician like Boris Johnson can't come out and say, we think this was an attack on the West by China in an attempt to weaken our economies and weaken our political structures and things like that. Because even though they know that might be true, if they actually say that publicly, not only would it put the British people in distress, it would also then start ramping up rhetoric for war, which is probably what they don't want to happen. So this is what I'm saying. There's all these moving parts going on behind the scenes, and it's not like I say, it's not literally the same as wrestling, but I find wrestling so fascinating because it is this amalgamation of, you have one story which you see on the TV screen. You have the story of this wrestler versus this wrestler, and they have beef for this reason. But then behind closed doors, there's other stories going on, the real stories going on, and the manipulations and the things that change that they can't say on TV, that they can't actually do in real life, because to do that would be to break the illusion. And that is something that I think is very fascinating about human behaviour, because if it can happen in wrestling, if you can have that culture of Kfade, they call it, if you can have that culture in wrestling, why would you not have it in something like politics where everything is on the line? It seems like they would almost go hand in hand. A lot of people like to think that the government should be more transparent about these things all the time, or more honest, or they should call out their enemies wherever they see fit, whether it be Russia, China, or Saudi Arabia, whoever they feel are enemies, Israel. I don't know. Not really thinking about the consequences of that. Like, did they ever think that maybe there could be good reasons to not do that? Because the situation could end up being a lot worse in the end. And that maybe there's a function to these smoke and mirrors. Now, I will say that there is also the function that it benefits people who are corrupt as well, because they can run around in the shadows more or less without any consequence, right? And that is an unfortunate side effect of this kind of political culture. But at the same time, if you subvert that culture and you break kayfabe, political kayfabe, then you run the risk of really grave consequences, that any discerning leader would say, we should probably not pursue that, So it's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation, but I think there's a lot to glean from observing this culture in wrestling. I think there's a lot to be said about it. Probably more than what I've said here today. But I just think it's a very interesting point of view. I don't know if many people think of it from that point of view at all. But I think that, like, the ways in which wrestling... the ways in which it can be chaotic, the ways in which it can be very calculated and manipulative, the ways in which it treats its wrestlers or its institutions, I suppose, if you want to call it that. I think if you look at how those people behave and how things happen, there's a lot to learn. Here's a good example. So you could look at wrestlers almost like political pundits of the day, and they kind of represent the different points of view of these like kind of left-wing activists that crop up and they show up on TV and on the news, and it's the same with the right-wing ones as well. And again, it's hard to know how much of these are orchestrated. Like, are they bought and paid for by certain people, or do they just naturally occur in the world? Hard to say. Maybe it's a bit of both. But these people are kind of like the wrestlers, essentially. They're the faces of the company, if that's what you want to call it, or the political system. And they can gain and curry favor. So as they rise and they say things on the TV that gain more controversy, or they gain more momentum, they become like they're running for like a title run. It's like they become fan favorites. They come in, they do battle, they say the things they need to say, and people go, yeah, yeah. Owen Jones can be considered one of these people. And but what can happen is, behind the scenes, some of these people can go rogue, and maybe they question the Vince McMahons of the world, or let's say someone like Wiley decides he wants to come out against the Jews, for instance, as a real world example. Or you have someone, and here's a wrestling example of the same kind of thing. Bret Hart was screwed over by Vince and Shawn in the infamous Montreal screw job, because Bret refused to give up his title to Shawn, even though Vince was asking him to, and he's the boss. So he went against the boss purposefully, and so they screwed him over, and he fell out of favour. And now we're starting to kind of connect the dots here. So if we look at cancel culture, what's the function of all that in this kind of wrestling hierarchy of things? Well, cancel culture acts as the baton, the billy club, and it's the Montreal screw job. That's what the cancel culture is. So you can be in political favour for a long, long time. People can love you and adore you, and think you are better than sliced bread. But then the one day that you say something out of turn and you go, you know what, man? Kind of think Jews running the world, or something, or you say Islam is not a religion of peace, or you could even go the Terry Crews route and say, I don't want to be racist, I think Black Lives Matter is racist, and I'm going to align myself with anyone who's anti-racist, be it white, black, Asian, whoever. Which to me is a very common sense attitude to have, and very honest and very genuine, yet can now be the catalyst for your demise. Which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So they've built these institutions, they built them up over time, and they've created this kind of kayfabe situation where people have to toe a certain line to be able to stay in the company. And if they don't toe that line, they're going to get shafted by the cancel culture. And this is more or less effective depending on the situation, depending on the person. Certain people have become wary to the mechanisms and can subvert it. And again, we'll go to another wrestling kind of ideal here, but not ideal, sorry, example. But Hulk Hogan, he had a heel turn. Now, if you don't know what a heel turn is, that means that he turned into a bad guy. He was always a good guy for a long time, then he turned into a bad guy. And when he turned into a bad guy, he went to the opposite side of the wrestling world. So you had one WWE, who were well known. Well, they were WWF at the time. They're like probably the mainstream, well known. Could be considered the left wing institutions of the world. And then you have WCW, who's an up-and-coming, anything goes, sensational TV kind of a thing. Kind of like free speech and right-wing kind of stuff. And he moves over to there. He becomes a bad guy, and he reaps the benefits of that. So you can't always say. Some people get savvy to this, the mechanisms of the systems that they're in, and can become uncancelable. They know how to move to the other side. They know how to. They know how to. They know how to thrive and survive in this scenario. And I think more people need to get savvy to that, and how to do that, because I feel like there is a lot of parallels here that we can draw, that we can learn a lot from. A lot of people are struggling these days to understand how we're supposed to deal with all this stuff, because it feels new. It feels like this is a new thing and we've never dealt with this before. It's this internet culture. Oh, it's all new and scary. But if you have a discerning eye, you will realise that these things have occurred in history before. There have been witch hunts before. There's been inquisitions. There's been McCarthyism. These things happen, and they've happened to pretty devastating degrees. And they're kind of just part of the human fabric of things. So we have to get wise to it. We can't panic and flap and go, oh my god, I said something 10 years ago and somebody might see it. No, we have to get wise to how these things operate, and we have to understand it. Now, one way to lay it bare in how to understand it is to become familiar with wrestling and to become familiar with how this stuff kind of works. And if you have that interest, and this is basically just to save you time. This is just to save you time on doing a lot of history research, because doing historical research is going to take you a lot more time, when you could learn some of the same lessons from just kind of understanding some of the stuff that goes on with the wrestling world. And to be honest with you, it's probably a little bit more entertaining as well, because there's a lot of wild and wacky stories out there. So there's a series on YouTube. At least I think it's on YouTube. If not, I'm sure you can find it elsewhere. I think it's called Beyond the Mat, or I wish I could remember what it was called now. That's going to really piss me off. Oh shit. But there's like Beyond the Mat, and there's like other behind the scenes type documentaries. I think one of them was done by Vice or something like that. And honestly, you should just watch some of those. They're like 50-minute episodes, and they will show you various instances of the wrestling world behind the scenes and what was going on in front of the cameras, and kind of give you an idea of the battles of wills and egos that go on. And I honestly think it gives you a little bit of an insight to human behaviour in these situations and what people do, and you can kind of transfer this knowledge into the political realm. I understand a lot of people will probably find this to be incredibly unacademic and incredibly nonsensical, probably. But I think if you've got a discerning eye, you'll see what I mean. You'll see what I mean pretty quickly if you get into this. And I think that, honestly, there is just a lot to learn. There's just really a lot to learn from it. And I've never been able to put my finger exactly as to why... I've never been able to put my finger on it as to exactly why I've always found wrestling so fascinating as I did. I always loved the duality and the paradox of the story on the stage and the story behind the stage. I've always loved that. I've always loved that dynamic, and I didn't really know why I loved it fully. But recently, because thinking about this, the prospects of World War III and the prospects of all the smoke and mirrors that are going on in the world, especially with the Russia report and all this stuff, I really did. It's made me think about it more and more. Like for some reason, when I'm thinking about the World War III prospect, I go, well, certain things that China are doing, this is kind of like wrestling. This is kind of like what they do in wrestling when they do this and they do that, and You know, like it just popped into my head, and I was like, oh my god, like this is. I feel like I've learned a lot from this, and so I just thought I would like to share that with people because I've never really seen that comparison made out there. I've never really seen people. I don't know what the word is for it. I've never really seen anyone establish a connection between the political kayfabe and the wrestling kayfabe, and how similar they really are when it comes down to it. And again, that is not to say they're exactly the same. Obviously, like I really want to stress that I'm really not trying to. And this is where probably a lot of people are going to take umbrage with me, but because they're probably going to take me very literally, as if I'm trying to say that wrestling is literally the same as politics. It's not. There is way more on the line with politics than there is with wrestling, and I do believe that plays a huge factor into how people behave and act in the political world. However, I'm just saying it can inform you as to the reasons as why things are happening as they are, and why politicians take the positions that they do. Okay? Another good example of this, and this is something that I learned like yesterday, which I honestly had no idea about. But Jeremy Corbyn obviously has positioned himself as a man of the working class who's here to help the working class, and he's there for the people. He wants to know the struggle and understand the people. Well, one thing I learnt about Jeremy Corbyn yesterday was that he's actually a millionaire. This guy has has a net worth of like 3 million, and Boris Johnson has a net worth of roughly 2 million. So all the times that Jeremy Corbyn was slandering Boris Johnson for being this rich guy who's just for the rich and all that kind of stuff, he was actually richer than Boris Johnson when he was saying that. And then that's when I start to look at them both as if they're like wrestlers in a wrestling ring. One's positioning themselves as this working class hero, one's this rich, Teddy DiBiase type. But in reality, they're both rich guys. And I wouldn't say that they're both in on it. I don't think they're both in on it. I think they both have their own separate agendas. It's not quite the same as wrestling, and that's what I'm saying here. It's not literally the same. But can you see where I'm coming from here? There is a certain level of parallel ideas going on here that I find to be very interesting. I don't know. Tell me what you think about my thoughts in the comments. If you think I'm just barking up the wrong tree, then fair enough. If you think this is something you've never heard before and you find it quite fascinating, again, let me know. I'd love to know what people have to say about this idea. But yeah, thanks very much for tuning in. Again, like I say, I'll have... In the meantime, while I'm making these other 2 videos, I will be posting more rant videos. I deleted my Facebook, and so I decided that I'm going to spend a bit more time just uploading to YouTube. So, yeah, expect a few more of these, probably. Just me thinking out loud about some stuff that's been on my mind recently. And the more well-researched videos... And by the way, the researched videos will all have... a multitude of links and sources to back up everything I'm saying as well. I want these to be thoroughly researched, and I don't want there to be a shadow of a doubt that I'm showing exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm being very transparent about everything that I've shown, and all the sources are reputable. I've been taking a lot of pains to do that. So, hope that's appreciated, and I really hope that... you guys tune in for that. I think this might be a bit of a turning point for this channel when these videos come out. So there's fingers crossed for that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to be ranting into the camera like I normally do, and hoping that I get a subscriber or two. So thanks very much for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Keep it real.